Good morning. I am Vijay Lakshmi, Assistant Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering from Thandai Periyar Government Institute of Technology, Delhi. Today we will be discussing about the clutches. So what is a clutch? The clutch is a device which is used in transmission system to engage and disengage the transmission system from the engine. So first of all, what is the need to engage and disengage the transmission system? So in certain cases where we have to change the gear from high to low or from low to high gear, if the transmission system is not disengaged, there may be clash in the gears and gear teeth failures may occur. And there may and during starting, when if the entire transmission system is attached to the engine, the starting torque or the torque required will be very high and starting motor will find it difficult to start. So in all these cases, we preferably try to disengage the transmission system from the engine. So for this particular purpose, we are using the clutch. So clutch is a device which is used to engage and disengage the transmission system from the engine. There are many types of clutches and we are going to see about clutches which are operating on the principle of friction. So the friction principle is very simple. A friction plate, so this will be pressed against the rotating flywheel. So since this is pressed against the flywheel, the friction plate starts to rotate. So inside the friction plate, you have a splines and on the splines you have the shaft. So when the friction plate rotates, the shaft rotates and the power is transmitted to the gearbox by the clutch gear which is located at the end of the shaft. So this is the principle of friction clutches. So let us see the case and the construction of a single plate clutch. So in a single plate clutch, the basic parts are, here you can see the friction plate. So inside the friction plate, you can see the splined hub. So inside the hub, you have the clutch shaft. At the end of the clutch shaft, you have the clutch gear. So this friction plate, and this you can see the ring of the flywheel, and this friction plate will be held against the flywheel by pressure plates. So these pressure plates are heavy and they are called as pressure plates because they exert pressure on the friction plate to hold it strongly against the flywheel. And then you can see the compression springs. So these compression springs again exert pressure on the pressure plate. And then you can see the cover. So you can see the entire thing is as a single unit. So you can call the flywheel and the clutch assembly together with the cover, they forms a single unit. And then you have the various linkage for operations including release levers, anti-rattle springs, release bearings, etc. So let us discuss how the clutch plate is. So you can see this, the clutch plate, it is a round disc. So the outer disc is, you have a steel disc. So it is not a single solid disc. You can see many steel plates which are riveted together. So why this, instead of using a solid steel plate, why we are using this type of construction is that so that it has some flexibility as well as for heat dissipation. Otherwise, it may fail when it is rotating at high speeds. And then you can see the inner reinforced splined hub which is present at the center. And on the outer edges, you can see the friction lining material. So these friction lining material are made up of asbestos, cotton and copper wires. So these can be either woven or molded together. And you can see torsion springs located in the body of the friction plate And this again is to take up the torque or the torsional load which is acting on the frictional plate. And then you can see the pressure plate. The pressure plate is a solid disc, or sometimes you can have an opening in the center and the outer rim only is present. It is a solid cast iron plate which is facing the clutch plate. So usually the pressure plate which is placing the clutch plate will have a smooth machined surface. So now we can see the two-dimensional diagram of a clutch plate. So this is the case when the clutch is in the engaged position, and this is the case when the clutch in the disengaged position. So you can see the flywheel that is attached to the crankshaft, and over the flywheel you can see the friction plate. So this represents the friction lining, the pressure plate which forces the friction plate against the flywheel, and then you can see the compression springs. Then you can see the release levers or release springs. Here you can see the release bearings. At the center of the friction plate or the clutch plate, you can see the splined hub. From the hub you have the clutch shaft. So this is a case when the clutch is in the engaged position. In the engaged position, the friction plate is pressed against the flywheel. So when the flywheel rotates, the clutch plate rotates. As a result, the shaft also rotates. This rotation is being transmitted to the gearbox. So now what happens when the clutch pedal is pressed? So what happens? So this is what happens when the clutch pedal is pressed. So this shows the clutch in the disengaged position. So in the disengaged position, you can see a small gap between the flywheel and the friction plate. So when the clutch pedal is being pressed, it forces the release bearings inside. So this causes the release levers to move outwards, taking the pressure plate along with them. So as a result, the pressure on the friction plate is reduced and the friction plate moves axially along the clutch shaft. So now the the, the clutch plate is not in contact with the flywheel, and therefore the power is not transmitted from the engine to the clutch shaft. So once the clutch pedal is released, the compression springs again forces the pressure plate onto the friction plate, forcing the friction plate to attach itself to the flywheel. And then the clutch comes to the engaged position and the power is transmitted. So this is the working of a single plate clutch. You can always see many varieties of other clutches where modifications are being made in the springs that are being used. So this one such modification of clutch is called as a diaphragm plate clutch. So this also has all the parts. You have the flywheel and you have the friction plate which is attached to the flywheel, and over that you have the pressure plate. But instead of the compression springs, we have the diaphragm springs or the Belleville springs. So these springs are nothing but they have spring-like slots and they are capable of flexing. So when you press it in the center, the fingers just move upwards. So when you give pressure in the center, the plate flex inwards, or you have a reversed mode. So what happens? The force on the pressure plate is reduced. As a result, the friction plate moves away from the flywheel. So whenever the clutch on the pedal is pressed, the center portion of the diaphragm spring is being pressed, so it moves inwards, and then the pressure on the pressure plate is reduced. So when the pressure in the clutch pedal is released, the diaphragm plate springs back to its original condition and becomes flat, and automatically pressure is being applied by the pressure plate onto the clutch plate. So what are the advantages of this type of clutches? It is a compact, and we can see that the diaphragm spring clutch is less affected by the centrifugal forces, and they do not tend to distort like coil springs. So you don't need to have release levers, and once flat position is reached, the driver need not exert heavy pedal force. Whereas in the case of the coil spring, the force the driver applies is proportional to the deflection of the coil springs. So whereas here, once the flat position is reached, you need not exert heavy pedal force. So again, the variation there is the clutch, the diaphragm spring life is much longer than compared to the coil spring. The force, the clamping force of the spring is remaining same throughout its life, and there is no slip. Since the load deflection is not linear as in the coil springs, so even if wear comes, the clamping force will not be reduced. Whereas in the coil springs, the driver has to apply more force to press the coil to a larger extent till whatever the wear is. To compensate for the wear, the driver has to exert more force. So this will not happen in the case of the diaphragm spring. Another one type of clutch is multi-plate clutch. So in the multi-plate clutch, you have more number of friction plates. This is also diaphragm plate clutch. So here you can see more number of frictional plates, and this is one friction plate and this is the pressure plate. So you can see 1, 2. So you can see 2 friction plates and you can see 2 pressure plates. So that is why it is called as multi-plate clutch. So the multi-plate clutch can be either dry or wet clutch. So dry clutch will not have any lubrication, whereas wet clutch will have some lubrication. As usual, the advantage of wet clutch is that heat dissipation is more effective, and the disadvantages is that there may be a chance of slip. So the multi-plate clutch has an advantage of so more torque can be transmitted for the same size of a single plate clutch, and it is smoother and easier to operate than single plate clutch. So multi-plate clutches are usually used in heavy commercial and agricultural machines. In addition to that, you also have semi-centrifugal clutch and clutches with assistance, power assistance, hydraulically operated clutch, pneumatically operated clutch, vacuum assisted clutch, and electrically operated clutch. So these will be discussed in detail when and where time permits. So with this brief introduction to clutches, I end this lecture. Thank you.